guys, we are back. John, Jeremy, and Jason. The Chapman.
Are you talking
brothers.
to us or to the audience?
I'm talking to everyone in the universe at large.
We're
back with another podcast.
We signed a contract recently that said
I didn't
you
sign
are allowed.
nothing.
I signed it on your behalf. You are allowed to use this content for all known and unknown broadcasting capabilities universally.
Yeah.
So that covers everything. Yeah. So that's who you're discussing or talking to right now. All people known and unknown species that might be listening in the future.
I feel like I'm refereeing a match here right now of the wits.
This is a mental arm wrestling session. Anyway. So I normally state this to Jeremy every time, so I'm going to do it again. How are you, Jeremy?
Thanks for asking, Jason.
It seems to be a tradition now.
And thank you to all the people known and unknown who are listening right now.
Listeners, I'm putting my hand under my chin in a very inquisitive way. Jeremy, how are you doing?
Oh, thanks for checking, man. It's been a good week. It's been busy. I've been doing a lot of stuff.
No, but how are you doing? I know how the business is doing, but how are you?
You're really peeling this onion, aren't you? You're going to make me cry. You're going to make me cry.
Take me back to your childhood.
It was so abusive.
Who was the biggest bully?
I had to,
your littlest brother or your older brother?
I was going to say, you guys took turns tying me down.
I
think my mustache has reached a new heights of popularity this week.
Yeah.
So I'm very
new
proud
heights
of
of
that.
unpopularity.
Yeah, heights of something.
I've had so many of our vendors contact me and says, "Has he got rid of that thing yet?" And I'm like, "No."
Well, at least it's a conversation starter.
It is. I'm so glad that you start conversations with your face.
Is this supposed to be like an evergreen conversation here, or are we allowed to talk about what?
There's video; they can see what's on my face right now.
Guys, the football season officially started. Last night was the first game, and my Chiefs.
Are we even allowed to mention in the NFL? I think if we descriptions,
I think they have some.
They
NFL
say you can't describe.
So there's that thing where
I was talking about football. I was speaking of the football.
Isn't that what they say in the thing? Yeah. Even in written descriptions,
unauthorized descriptions of the.
Yeah. So don't even talk about it.
Oh, I want to talk about it. My Chiefs did not perform.
I love how
full
fans own the team.
Yeah, it's my team.
It's like going
to a concert and saying, "That's my Alison Krauss up on stage."
I like her.
My band did a great job tonight.
I feel like it is.
Isn't that weird? My band sounded awesome tonight. Oh, you're in a band?
Weird.
No, I'm a fan of Alison Krauss.
Is this what the podcast is about? We're going to talk about people owning sports teams.
It's odd.
How about your team, Jer?
I am open to all teams.
You know what we should talk about is our actual teams. This year, Jeremy got in on the Acoustic Shoppe.
The Acoustic Shoppe has a fantasy football team league, league. And I hate to say it, but you guys are going to get beat. My stats don't look great in the beginning, but I'm here to tell you it is going to be a good season.
As if you're some expert.
Oh, I'm absolutely an expert. I'm just like grabbing stuff on here.
Guys,
that looks good.
I used a spreadsheet to pick out my team this year, so good luck to you.
This is Jeremy's first year. This is my second year. I came in last year, so if I come in the middle this year,
Jeremy will be the one to be the last one today.
Money ball is happening right now.
No, I think it's our social media coordinator who didn't even show up for the draft. I think she's going to come in first.
Yeah, probably an automatic.
Another really more important thing, we reached a new milestone on YouTube, 20,000 subscribers and 5 million views.
Now you're really getting away from evergreen.
Yeah.
Well, this will show you the progress we've made since there. If you look now, it's probably 1 billion.
Yeah, obviously. Anyway.
All right. What are we talking about today, guys?
That wraps up our newsreel portion of the podcast.
Jason, how are you?
Oh, thank you.
What's been going on in your life?
It's been tough.
What keeps you up
when
at
I was
night?
a little kid, my older brother used to bully me.
Does he still do that?
Yes, he does.
Oh, you deserve it.
Yes, and he has a weird
All right, shut up, idiot. Let's start this podcast.
All right. On to the podcast. Thank you for that interlude. I'm doing this a lot with my chin.
You know what that reminds me of?
I think it's because I'm tired. I stayed up late last night.
I introduced my kids to Napoleon Dynamite, where she has her
slowly up under your chin.
That was my favorite scene right there.
Where this is an audio medium, so as if you guys remember the movie.
Uncle Rico was getting his photo taken, in case you guys don't remember.
What was her name?
I can't remember either.
She had puffy sleeves, though.
Yeah, she had puffy sleeves and a side ponytail, and she made boondoggles.
Good stuff. Anyway.
My kids quote that now all the time.
We did, too.
All they do.
That's all that movie's good for is quotable quotes.
My head's very hot.
All right. Yes. Okay. Now we're doing a Napoleon Dynamite podcast.
Okay.
All right. Let's get serious.
Why is Napoleon
let's talk about why we're here.
I am not going to give you the subject matter because I get in trouble if I don't get exactly what's in Jason's head.
You should not do that.
As previously discussed,
the golden era of guitar building.
Is it, Jeremy? Is it?
Is this the golden era of banjos?
No. All right. For reference, that was a previous podcast you can go back and listen to if you're new to the podcast. Jeremy and me got in a bit of a tussle on air, and it got a little heated.
Would you say you were
serious?
Bickering?
That was some real.
Who was bullying who?
You got angry and you.
What is this podcast about, Jason?
Is this a golden era of podcasts? No. As previously discussed, we get this question asked a lot, and I always want to answer it. And this gives us an opportunity to reminisce and also look to the future. We get asked a lot, what's harder, running a music store empire or a bluegrass band empire?
A family bluegrass band.
We're going to answer that question right after this.
I can't wait to find out the answer.
Take me away, 'cause I can be the way. Let somebody was letting go and I can't have my way.
Okay, so anybody new to the podcast and new to the Acoustic Shoppe family, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We appreciate you being a part of our world. But previous to owning a music store that is in Springfield, Missouri, called the Acoustic Shoppe, we were world famous musicians in a small family band that is unknown to the world.
Yes, we were world famous, but nobody knew us.
The Chapmans. We grew up in a family band.
Yes.
The three of us, our dad and mom started originally with us, and then we added a fiddle player. But we signed Compass Records, toured a lot. We were
all kidding aside. It was a
25-year
really decent career for a long period.
Some good records, some number ones.
I every once in a while I listen back to those albums and go, God, did we really do that? But it's more of like, God, we did
tour literally worldwide. We went to numerous European nations. We went to some South American ones on cruises in Canada.
I like those.
And all kinds of really cool places we got to see. We played in every single state, every contiguous state. So we didn't do Alaska or Hawaii. We did officially. We did every.
I don't think we ever played in Rhode Island.
We did. We did. Ask Dad.
Quit it.
Ask our father. Anyway, we played in every state. Did festivals for years. There was a period where we were on the road about 260.
Jeremy, did we really play in Rhode Island?
60 dates per year.
Let's start another fight.
Not dates. We were on the road 260 days a year. So a long history of playing music. Yeah. And
the thing about having a bluegrass band is it is running your own business because there isn't this team. We don't have an entourage of managers and agents and marketing people. We pretty much did everything ourselves. We had one or two agents at short intervals that never truly worked out. So we pretty much ran the business as we do run this business ourselves. So there are some similarities, but there's also some complete differences. The biggest difference I come to when people ask me that question is we didn't really run it as a business when we were a band. It was a very weekend warrior, accept calls. When Dad was booking us for the most part. So I mean, he did make calls through the week, but I
think I take a little bit of exception to that. I think it was a business.
Would because you didn't do anything.
No, I think it was a business. It was just more like a fledgling business. It was there. It wasn't quite as structured as what we have now.
That's what I'm saying. The mic.
No, I didn't.
I heard a burp.
I think I cleared my throat. No, I could have muted that out.
Let's take this, a step back. And I don't, like I said, I'm not arguing with you just to argue with you. But think of also a lot of the acts and bands that we still see to this day and the level of business that they run it at or some of those run it at the level that we did, and then there's also the level of business.
I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to take a step back from your step back.
How many steps are we taking?
And
back?
we're going. You
take one step forward to get 2 steps back.
I'm going to need a pair of binoculars.
Opposites attract.
Discussion.
That's essentially what Jeremy's saying is opposites attract. But anyway, I agree with you. Yes, compared to other bands, it was running as a business. But that's my other point that I was going to make. Sorry, my watch almost came off. Is when bands aren't run as businesses, and that was another point that I was going to make for most people, for 90% of the people, and that's what we did the same way until we learned as we grew older that you have to run it as a business. Toward the end, we were starting to run it as a business, and I think that played into this business.
There's so many businesses right
There's so many businesses
included as a business.
But now you ruined everything I was saying.
I got your point. That I think industry-wide, musicians in general, it's probably an overgeneralization that artists in general don't make their own best management or business decisions. And it's not just artists, athletes. I've read stories about some of these football players that have zero sense of how to run their finances, and they burn through more than they're making. But then you have others that they diversify. Even your favorite Kansas City Chief football player, he's buying like 60 Whataburgers in Kansas City, and he's diversifying, and they say he's got a really good business mind, but there's so many that don't think outside of, hey, I'm an athlete, I'm paid to catch this football.
Can I take a pause here real quick?
Let's take a step back.
For these, but a step back. For you first-time listeners, or even just a few-time listeners to the podcast, there will be very few conversations where Jeremy doesn't go, even football players, and football players do this, football players do that.
I'd like to use the football analogy to illustrate John's point. No, I'm not really going to do that.
Is that not true?
It's true.
It's true.
He does like football.
Be prepared. There's going to be so many of those. All right.
Jeremy's about
unpause. You can go back to it. I just want to point that out so they know what's going to happen.
So essentially he's saying you can step forward.
Guys, if you would just listen to the podcast, you wouldn't need John to lay it out for you. You come to that conclusion on your own.
Were you done?
I think in general, what your point was is that musicians, they want to learn how to play music. They love performing in front of people, but none of them really think or even probably had any business experience prior to that. So it's just kind of like, here, let's throw this person into this pool and say, go make a living. And that's why a lot aren't very successful.
It's got to be some sort of, maybe a physical difference in musicians, and maybe we're not very good musicians that way.
Right
we're
brain,
better
left
being,
brain.
That's probably
we're probably better being business people. I don't know if it's that. I'm just joking about that, but I think it's a learned trait because I'm running into that now. We kind of are starting to interact with artists and online contributors. And 90% of them we deal with are very irresponsible and unorganized.
Right now.
What?
I hope they're not watching right now.
I'm not naming names, but I'm just saying we've interacted with other YouTube celebrities and other artists and trying to collaborate with these people. And man, it's hard to get them on a schedule and commit to things and have things happen on a regular basis with them because they're just so scattered. And I don't know if it's that. Maybe it's theirs.
I'm sure there's levels of this that we're, like you mentioned earlier, that, we were at a level, but when you think of how we operate this business compared to like a Goldman Sachs or something.
We're not even there.
Like we have no business sense at all. Like, and I think that's on the road when we were touring, we were kind of that intermediate one because there are the Thiele's and the Bela Flecks and those guys that are much better musicians than just about anyone on the planet and are very good at knowing how to run a business and run it like a business. We talked to Kristen Scott about how they do that. They diversified and they do the teaching, they do camps, they do books, they do the touring. So there's different levels.
You, which I'm going to do right now.
Please do.
You said Chris Thiele. Those guys are, I think the difference with those guys is they're smart enough to know that they can't be the businessman, and they practice up and they spend all their efforts into becoming incredible musicians, and the business sense comes after that with their help of a good manager and a good agent. But that was just my caveat to what you were talking about. I think there's certain levels of musicians that know that they're going to be good enough and go that direction where they work hard, like Sierra Hull. She may be a great businesswoman. I don't know that, but she does have a great team behind her. I know that, and she's an incredible musician. So I'm assuming she spends all of her time practicing.
I do find I get your point there, but I think at least the management that we've dealt with, you still have to be pretty involved in telling them what you want them to do. You need to be on the phone with him telling me I wanted to go this direction, or I'm sure when he worked on the Prairie Home Companion, it was hey, let's have this conversation, or there's just numerous examples of that where you have to guide them daily. And Vincent's another great example. Very business minded. Rhonda, Vincent. These guys have a plan, and even if they have a team around them, they're orchestrating the entire thing. They're not just kind of saying, "Hey guys, go make me famous and put the money in my account when you're done."
Yeah.
So
there are those guys that are great businessmen and women.
I think it's officially been secured in, like I said, it's a generalization, but art type of people, their brains work in a different direction. And this is artsy people.
Can't say fart on the radio.
Oh, you can.
But it is very commonly known. I mean, if you watch any movie, any, entertainment deal, when you start dealing with that musician or that artist, they sleep in till 3 or 4 in the afternoon. They stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Jackson Pollock right now.
No, it's just me. It was me. Anyway, no, it's part of the brain chemistry. And I know where, it's a weird conversation to have because we all are kind of in that artist. I'm definitely built more of that, and it's hard to get myself on a work ethic. I recognize it. If I didn't have these two on my butt all the time, I probably wouldn't get half the amount of stuff.
One word you can't say on podcasts.
If I didn't have them on my rear end, delay, please. I wouldn't want to. I was one of those people when we were touring, when we were doing this. That lifestyle. I was the 3, 4 in the morning person and didn't get up till 1 in the afternoon. It was, and I played music.
We were acutely aware of the fact that you weren't working.
Show up at the festival on 2 minutes before the set would go. All right, guys, where's my guitar?
Yeah,
that was his.
Why is this not tuned? No,
it's not quite the truth.
But I get what you're saying there, and I've worked with other artists, and there is this. This artist brain of they don't think about things in that aspect, and the ones that do maybe are the ones that are even more successful. But I can't say that as a fact either, because there's tons of those kinds of artists that find a good team around them and they get them to that point. So
I worked with I got a student who had a very successful marketing company, and he would always talk about it as the creatives that he had to hire. And for those creatives, he had to have people to kind of keep them in line. You have to have those creatives, but you have to have the other people, in the right places in order to keep that stuff going.
Are you saying that me and Jason are uncreative?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. I mean, it was pretty. It's pretty obvious. Listen to your playing.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Yeah, hold for laughs. Anyway,
I already had them.
But going back to my point, I think, and this plays into both those points. I think it's a learned trait for us because, as much as you say we ran the band as a business, we played a whole lot of Halo during the week, and I don't know if it's because I had no children or responsibilities, but also didn't. I didn't think of the business that much during the week. We made 1 or 2 phone calls. We edited a couple of videos, put them out on YouTube, and then played Halo until 5 in the morning.
I think we confessed to all this on our very first podcast. Go check that out. Episode 1 with Alan Bartram, where we talked about when we went to Nashville, we would just goof off, go golfing, just play around. Yet Alan had that mindset of, hey, this is kind of what I chose as a career. Let me do something to make it happen.
He also not a creative.
Let me put a little structure to this and ask you guys questions on this stuff too, because
You're the host.
At what point did you realize that we have to run this as a business?
Which one? The band?
The band. Okay. Well, no, the music store as a business. To be honest with you, and I'm going to be candid with the folks on the radio, when this came about, this was mostly a Jeremy and somewhat John idea, but the business side of it, Jeremy was talking about. And the beginning of this business, I thought of it as a band situation where it would be supplemental income that we did. I was still working a full-time job at the time and playing music. And Jeremy came up with the idea, and I thought, well, there's a need for a music store, but I don't ever see it being beyond a 20-hour a week paycheck. Until a certain point where I realized, wait, this is a business, and we can kind of rely on this as income for our family. And I was probably 4 or 5 years into it before I came on full time, but I realized that it could support our families. At what point did you guys realize that this could be a full time gig.
I don't think it. I guarantee you. Again, if we're having confession time here, I think me and Jeremy originally, the whole point of this business was when we started it was to supplement the lesson income, which we had began to rely on. It was
we were still touring pretty good at that.
Yeah,
time
we were
as well.
touring quite a bit, and the lessons during the week we would be out on the road for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, get back home Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was lesson time, and we had a pretty good business going with that. The store started. Do we want to go into that? The entire reason why we started the store and how it all came about?
Can you keep a condensed version?
I'll give you the Cliff Notes. All right, here's the deal. Me and Jeremy were teaching. I had close to 40, 45 students. You were pretty close to that, I would say.
About 30.
Yeah, and we had that the business, the music store that was in the location where we're at right now, told us on a November 1st that he was closing on Black Friday, which would have gave us about 3.5 weeks to finish out. And after that, we were both going, well, I got to keep teaching. I got all these students. This is a pretty good income. So we're trying to figure that out. None of the other stores wanted to do it. So we contacted the place that the lady who owned the building and said, can we just rent the lesson studio side of it? We did that, got a good price on it. We did it for all of a month before we got a phone call from her that said, would you be interested in renting the entire building for only about $200 or $300, if I remember right, more than what we were paying for that? You can have the whole thing. And we were just like, well, let's run the numbers, because we knew we were paying so much to make that business work. We knew we were going to pay our studio rent of our lessons into the business to pay for the rent of the building. And we were like, well, if we just sell strings, a few extras, this kind of stuff, we should be able to make that all happen. That, turned into us just dumping our money back into it. Every dollar that we got in went right back into inventory. We had less than $10,000 complete to make the entire thing happen, and that was a remodel, everything to do the entire store. So I think we ended up having like $3,000 worth of inventory, which for a music store is pretty dismal. That said, that's how it all grew. So that first initial thought for us, for the music store, at least for me, was we can grow this into something. Hopefully we sell some instruments. We, do this business, and it'll be good secondary income to that. But it depended on the lesson business.
So yeah, now that we've got the Cliff Notes, brought it up to speed on starting the business, to get to your question, I don't think any of us were really thinking of it in business terms at that point. Because I remember thinking, boy, if we do this, I'll have all day long, because we remember being in the store before us, and there'd be a lot of dead time in the store where not much was going on. I'd be like, I can be getting on the phone and calling festivals and booking too. So I'll be in the shop during the day, and if it's slow, I'll book some more shows for the band, and wasn't really thinking of the music store as a full business. In fact, we weren't taking paychecks the first 3 years. We didn't pay ourselves for any time we worked in it. It was just all that money that we would make, we'd buy more inventory, and we would just use the lesson money to basically pay our lesson money and touring money as our income as a family. But then as it started to grow, we had some really good customers right off the bat. Eric Pauly was one. He recommended we get with SCORE, which is like your local advice. Is a free program out there where mentorship, where a bunch of successful business owners have retired and now they offer their advice and expertise on a volunteer basis with new startup businesses. So I went to that, got some really good advice and read some books, and started to get the bug of this. If you're going to start a business, get systems in place, start building this thing and see where it goes. And it just started to snowball from there, where we could see, hey, this is actually becoming a thing and more feasible. So, but it was probably year 3 or 4 before it really started to make sense, where we started to pay ourselves $5 an hour at first to ease into that. And I remember hiring our first employee, I think it was Liz, wasn't it? No, Brian. I think Brian was our first full employee.
No, Liz was first. I think, but
yeah.
But there
was a couple in between there that worked here, but
for short amounts of time, yeah.
Yeah, but full-time employees.
Talk about a learning curve up front. I mean, I knew nothing about sales tax and calculating payments to the state. And I remember going out to get the utilities put in our name and trying to get a bond.
Name.
And it was just, none of us understood the tax implications of having inventory that it now counts as income. And it was a big learning curve, but I think it just kind of organically grew into a full-fledged business where we had to learn actual business techniques, and I started to get addicted with business books on tape, Audible, and then also podcasts.
So going back to the original question on this, to offshoot from that question, with the business and how hard it is to run, did you ever see, I know we have our aspirations as a business and our numbers, and we have projections now and all that stuff. The difference, I think, of whether it's harder or not to run a band or a business is the structure. I think with an artist and as a band, I never once thought in those terms. I always, you're always thinking of trying to get a song to be recognized or to get more plays of this or more bookings. And that's your basic goal, is just get more income, essentially, and more awareness or fame, however you want to put it. Never really put it as fame as a term, because you're never going to be famous in what we ever did. But so as a business side of running a band, I would say this comes easier. For a point, this comes easier to run, but it's so much more intricate and detailed to run this as a business than a band. But I feel like it almost lends itself to being easier in my book to run as a business. And maybe it's because I have more help than I used to have as a band. But
or do you think it's the experience we've gained in going out and learning actual business techniques? If we went back to be a band, you could still apply these to that.
I want to put it like
here's my answer to that question before John interrupts me rudely.
Take a step back.
No, don't let me forget my answer, guys, please. I think the outside factors that demand success to a band are so much less in your control than a business like this. With a business like this, we have inventory and we have products that are cool that we can show. There's always that. Nobody has to buy our band, but there are people that are looking to buy instruments. They're that are buying, what we're selling is so much easier to sell than as a band. The market's bigger. The products are easily sold, and they're, maybe it's because they're better quality than the music we are selling. I don't know. But I feel like we struggled as a band to sell ourselves so much harder than we do our business now. So
I think
that was my.
I see what you're saying. I can make a counter argument for each of those points. I think, as with any discussion, you can always do that. Here's what I think is the big difference, and I think this is how our store started. A lot of mom and pop stores start this way, but it's definitely the way people look at bands and being a musician or an artist or anything. It's, how can I make a living out of what I do? Okay, and playing as a musician, making a living is possible. Making it a business is a whole different thing altogether. Like, there's people that set up craft malls and create a little thing, and they make a living out of that. Turning that into a business is a completely different thing. And I think 90% of the bands that we talk about are coming at it our musicians come at it with, how do I make a living out of this? They're not really thinking of all the steps to make this go to another level. They just want to figure out how to continue to feed their families, to do the things that they want to do. And I've seen this and honestly, it was the mentality I had. I know me and Jeremy had this discussion, I think, just before you came on full time, but I looked at this store as an extra way to make a living. It was never supposed to be in my head, because I saw the competition. We had Guitar Centers and Sweetwaters and all these big deals out there, and I'd been in the retail end of it. I'd seen how big those companies are, and I'm like, man, we would have to put so much into this to be able to match them. And I, me being the pessimist that I am for that kind of stuff, didn't see that as an option. Later on, we had that conversation. Jeremy's like, I see this as becoming something, and I literally told him, I just don't see it. I just don't see it, which is a common argument we have. I know you're going to say that. But I looked at this as a way to make a living. And I think that's a totally different deal. Once we looked at it as a business and started treating it like a business and started taking on more of the important, aspects of inventory control and, utilities, and not just spending things because we need to do it, and just, how do we get the next dollar to come in? It was, forecasting and coming up with systems. That's when it changed into a business. And that, to me, is the big difference.
I think the argument of how to make any business a living, I think that's the goal of every business in the end. I think I understand what you're saying, but there's different levels to a living. Right now, we're trying to make a good living for our families and our employees' families. That is the main goal here. I don't think nobody's looking for fame here in this business. I think we're having fun.
I didn't mean it in that way.
Yeah, I know. I get what you're saying, but I think you see the difference that you're talking about between the startup businesses and our mentality, and then even beyond that, the larger businesses like Sweetwater is the bigger picture. The perspective of it. I think they're all trying to provide the best service and make the biggest amount of income for their families and their employees' families, and supply something.
I think I can almost pinpoint the moment that John and I had this conversation of, hey, this could actually be a legitimate business. And originally I was thinking about multi-location, and if we're doing this well in Springfield, if we go to a bigger market and have different markets and just focus on acoustics. But it was that first year of going to the NAMM show as a retailer, not as a band, and seeing the size and scope of the industry, sitting through some of the sessions and the seminars they were doing, and thinking, whoa, this is a lot bigger than just a local music shop. Like, the industry is enormous. And they have all the numbers of how much is spent every year in music industry purchases, and the number of stores out there, the number of manufacturers. You just go to the drum section alone of that place and just like, I didn't realize the size of this.
And that kind of goes back to that point I was talking to you about. There's this whole world of music, of music retail that's out there that's ready to be, consumed. Whereas in music, you're really just kind of on your own island, making something that's completely uniquely your own. And
I think those aren't exclusively different from each other. I mean, we're using NAMM as an example of like the entire industry coming together. You could also pick, Coachella as something as a band showing up there and going, wow, look at the size of the music industry. Like there's still, we're in a very small niche of what we just talked about. There's tons of people that want to go watch these smaller concerts too, or go to these festivals. So the band still has that same opportunity to reach fans as we do to reach guitar buyers. I think it was just, we never approached it in that, my only
argument to that, though, and I want to stick to this point because I truly believe that I'm right and you're wrong, is you don't have every person that's listening to this podcast and every person that's watching TV right now at home building a guitar, but you do have them at home playing guitars.
But you do have everybody listening to this podcast also going to concerts and buying CDs and buying, well, not CDs, but downloads. That might be also a part of the problem I was thinking too, is that musicians really got, pardon my French, they got screwed a bit by the lack of control of their product. Like the movie industry, you cannot just go and download any movie without paying for it. You can't stream every movie possible out there with commercial interruptions. Or, they really controlled the medium, where music, they just, what was it?
It comes down to the lack of
the one where you just downloaded everybody's
Napster
and all that came out.
That comes to the lack of value that people put on art, for one. But I still maintain.
Are you saying movies are not art?
There's still bad control on movies too. I mean, it's not like they're making their full amount. But I still maintain that the difference is, you're talking about CD sales and stuff, and nobody ever made money off CD sales or music sales unless you're at a certain level. Unless you're at a certain level. I'm talking about indie artists. Where we all made our money was competing at concerts and festivals. The problem with concerts and festivals to make money.
I disagree with that. But
do you?
Yeah, I do.
How do you disagree with that?
I think most people were planning on paying their bills and all that stuff off of merch sales, and has been that way.
We never made enough money to maintain our band as merch sales.
I didn't know this was going to become an argument.
I am arguing this.
I noticed this. This is an adamant argument. I think you're missing a key point here.
You're forgetting
in that
how much we made on CD sales.
This was a small industry. Music is always a small industry. I think you're forgetting there's buildings. BMI building in Nashville has so many people working in through there. We went in our first time to go into the CMA building and discussed with all. That is a huge enterprise that those people have opportunities to work through those same channels that we do in the industry for NAMM and all those kind of deals. That industry is beyond just the musicians.
But we're also not comparing ourselves to Guitar Center either, because we only do stringed instruments. So you can't necessarily say that the whole of NAMM is at our doorstep either. So you want to talk about, you're comparing maybe 10 or 20 booths at the entire 700 booths at NAMM. that were in our industry. So if you want to compare those
I'm
two.
confused about what we're talking about now.
Well, I'm just saying.
This became so weird.
Could you please explain what's going on? No.
I'm saying that, bluegrass that we were working in, I was just keeping my narrow focus and our experiences in bluegrass. It's the same difference.
What I'm trying to bring it back around to is, and I don't really totally know the answer, but if we had approached, and if we go back into playing as a band, and there are some examples of this, the Petersons down in Branson are a good example of kind of taking a little bit more control of their image. You were talking about how we have so much a better ability now to sell instruments because everybody wants an instrument. But you go to YouTube, some bands are super successful of selling themselves by doing high quality production level filming and releasing stuff and marketing on a much higher level. And even in the bluegrass industry, there's a few that are doing really well with that. Versus, what we were doing before, where it's just kind of like, let's throw some flyers out and see if people want to come to the next concert.
Hope people will connect with that, and maybe we'll become a next sensation. I mean, I agree with you. It's all luck. I think it's luck what we're doing right now. Yes, we put a lot of hard work into this business, and we made the chances for success bigger by doing so. But in the end, it always comes down to the right things hitting at the right time with the right connections. I mean, that's all of it. Our connections with our vendors were the right time at the right place to make that happen. Our not connecting with the vendors has been the wrong time at the wrong place, or right, wrong, whatever it happens to be.
What?
Yes,
I blacked out for a second there. All right. Well, to get back to that,
answered the question, which is harder to run as a business.
No. Well, we're not going to answer that yet because we still have a little time on our podcast.
We're so unexperienced.
Don't be trying to end it yet.
I'm not.
But I think day to day running this business is harder. It's harder work. I put more hours in this than I've ever put in anything in my life. But I still think that hard work converts to success easier than hard work in music converts to success. I truly maintain that.
There probably is a little bit more of a luck factor and getting discovered at the right time by the right person in music than there would be here. I know
way too many great musicians that spend their entire time awake practicing and getting better and just could blow the doors off of 90% of the successful musicians in any genre.
But I feel like ever take it on as a business?
So I remember, and
that's my argument.
One of the things that started to turn our business around, at least in my viewpoint too, was a book recommended at the Score was the E-Myth Revisited. And basically the premise of that is everybody that wants to start a business just goes in, they've got this idea for a business and they run the entire business. And it uses a bakery. We're cleaning the kitchen in the morning, we're making the pies, we're advertising the pies, we're selling the pies, we're cleaning up the next night and then starting all over the next day. And that just turns into now we're just doing a job. And that's what a lot of bands do, is just like, all right, we're booking the show, we're going to play the show, we learned the song, we're going to play a new song, and then we're doing all this, and you're working in the business as an employee so much that you don't have time to grow it. Towards the end of our career, we started to get a little bit better at systematizing us as a band. So we would give an assignment of when we arrive at the festival, I'm the merch person. I go set up the tent. I set up all the CDs. I get all the stuff ready. You guys go get the sound system set up. Dad meets with the promoter. We would all have kind of roles and responsibilities, and we started to do much better once we started to develop it in those terms. And we started to bring a sound man, and then he has that role. And it just it started to show kind of the same growth as a business as we have now on a much more detailed level. I think if you went back into it with a lot of that sort of knowledge, forethought, expectation, we could do. It's probably still more difficult to make it, but we could still run it as a business much better than we did before.
I agree with that. I think case in point, we did this, again, one of our early podcasts that we did talking about Rhonda Vincent and the work ethic and the business that she runs. There is no, to me, no better example of a person. I'm definitely not saying a very, very talented person. It's been doing this.
One of the best out there.
But this, you got to realize she's been beating down doors for a long time, and it took until she's really just business. And I think a lot of that lesson was taught to her in her run in the country music industry, where it was like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And all of a sudden it opens her eyes to the fact that there's a whole lot more. And we've all seen it. That lady works her business all the time, whether it's with the fans, whether it's with the people who are, recording, distributing, getting product, promoters, whatever it is, it's a business end to her. And then she hires the right people to hopefully get that done. It is a business. You guys all know that. And when she takes it on as a business, that's part of what makes her the queen of bluegrass. You take your top naming acts, Traveling McCurry's. Ron McCurry is kicking butt as a businessman with the Traveling McCurry's. He's running it as a business. He knows that. When they're doing,
they also have a great manager too.
They're good. But that's a business. That's what I'm saying. That's a business. You get the right people in the right space. I mean, that's the truth with us. This store, you said the E-Myth Revisited. Me, you, and Jason were working this store all the time. And it wasn't until we had people to take us out of those roles where we could move into the spaces. That gives us the opportunity
to sit here and argue with each other about whether or not we're going to be successful.
That we're right. Who's right? Who's right?
Jeremy, quick, give me a situation where somebody needs an instrument fast.
There is a band that's performing. You want to get backstage. You don't know how to get backstage, but you're a huge fan. So you grab a guitar, you walk backstage and say, hey, I got to get this to the lead singer. He needs it now.
All right, John, give me a situation quickly where they can get that guitar.
Well, here's the deal. You guys can go to theacousticshoppe.com and get on there. You can search for guitars. You can check by brand. You can check by style. All those different things. Order it. It will be shipped that day, if not the very next day.
Now give me a situation where they need a banjo.
There's no need for a banjo. Everybody knows nobody needs a banjo.
But if you did need a banjo, you go to theacousticshoppe.com. Like John said, check us out. And thanks for supporting the podcast.
I can't think of a reason.
Nobody has a reason for a banjo.
Another question occurred to me it goes back to, I was thinking
I don't really put anything in it. I was kind of comment every now and then.
Halfway listening to what you guys are saying, but not necessarily listening, but just thinking.
It's been the way
Jason maintains its own moisture level.
No.
Not mustache related.
No, it's not mustache related. You talk about, whether or not, and this is an interesting question that I want to ask again later.
I love when people think their own questions are interesting.
This is very thoughtful and interesting.
I love listening. I'm going to keep your thought. Don't lose it because you're going to lose it. I love listening to radio shows or TV like newscasts, and the guests ask the question and then they go,
"I'm forgetting."
Great question. It's like, what are you in kindergarten? You got to be encouraged. You asked a good question, Jimmy. Go ahead.
Do you see the H behind my right arm?
I knew you lost it, didn't you?
No. It's about timing. So you talked about what we've learned as a business, but also I think it might be about timing our success, because these things that we're able to do now that we're good at, marketing, obviously, things like this, we're good at putting ourselves on channels like YouTube and stuff nowadays.
Which brings up another good
Which brings timing of it all. If we were to start the business and the band from scratch on two different universes at the same time frames, do you think that would make multiverse? We're going into this multiverse situation here. Thor,
bad. Do we have a bad Jason?
Thor is our manager,
and Jason.
Spider-Man is our sound man. But do you think that the difference in success in the band would be that much of a difference? So if we say we're starting the Chapmans in 2010-ish as we started this business, and the start of the YouTube revolution and all that stuff, the opening up of all this, the ability to make high quality content on the cheap, do you think that would make that big of a difference in our business in music as it has in retail?
I think it could have. I think part of that is we were maybe before some of the medium that we're almost geared
and not
towards.
To discount the fact that what we did as a band at the time didn't launch us into what we're doing now.
That's what I was going to say with that second point. But to answer your first question, good question, by the way. I think, we seem to be geared towards this sort of thing where we just like doing this. We were doing it, and that's what Alan talked about early on, is we were doing a lot of this video footage before, but the people weren't quite... They weren't there as much. Facebook was brand new, so people
now we have 80-year-olds on TikTok, whereas back in those days we had they didn't even know how to use a phone.
They didn't know they thought Facebook was a phone book. Am I right? Anyway, so I think what we do well definitely was more set for this time, and if we had started the band at that time, it probably would have snowballed a little bit better. the second point, which you were kind of alluding to a little bit too, is I wouldn't say that the success we have in the store and with the media isn't related to all those years touring and playing and performing. Like we kind of have that performance
in multiple ways, lessons learned, and the audience.
We learned along the way that people want to be entertained. They want to get to know you on a personal level. If they just wanted to hear us play music, they would just buy the CD or do the download. They wouldn't come out to a concert to experience you as people. You know, when you go to see somebody, you want to feel like you know them and the banter in between songs. And we realized that real quickly. And that's basically what we just moved over into a totally different industry, into the retail, which I think gives us a bit of advantage because most retailers don't look at it that way. They're like, why would I get on YouTube? I've got
selling products.
I've got people coming to my door wanting to know about which strings to use on their guitar.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. And they could look online if they want to find that somewhere else. It's not about that. People want to feel like they know you and have a personal relationship.
They do want to have that. I want to pose,
which I think was band related. What gave us that?
I want to pose two questions. Do you think part of this
question, John.
is just maturity? And the fact that we just don't care anymore.
Desperation, maybe?
Definitely not maturity. I mean,
just being older. So we talk about this. We got all the people,
experience
the younger.
and maturity.
Well, there's that, but it's also, I don't know. We got the young guys that are over there in the sales department, and when the camera turns on, they don't feel as comfortable with it. And part of that is just the fact that we've just done it so long. And I'm also at the age now that I just don't, when you guys say mean things about me, I don't care.
I have no embarrassment.
Mustache. You think I care what you think?
Yeah, exactly. I have no embarrassment switch anymore. Guys, I poop my pants on stage. I'm not scared of anything. All these years, anything that could have happened in the public eye has happened.
There you go. But so there's a little bit of that maturity going on, right? That
maturity says after that.
But also, let's talk about this as
we're just spouting
a reason for what's going on here. Every entrepreneur that I've learned to meet in the last 10 years that we've started doing this.
Learn to meet them.
Well, you know what I mean. That I've started to be around more because I was mostly around musicians. They're not entrepreneurs. You know, most of them, they don't think of it that way. You talk to those guys who have this business mind. They're looking for the next best business. And the idea always is, here's what I did the last time, and here's what I'm going to do next time that's going to be so much better.
Here's what I learned from that.
This is, and they have that kind of mindset.
I've already got a few business ideas set.
And you already got ideas of how you're going to beat it on the next one? Yeah, I mean...
Cutting some dead weight, if you know what I mean. No, I get what you mean. It's a combination of all those things, I think, is what it's going to come down to. I think if we jumped into running a music store without our years of playing and touring, we would have closed year one or year two because we had no reason to be in it except that we love music and playing music. And we took some of those lessons we had learned as a touring band and put those into practice on a retail level, which was kind of new to our industry. Andertons, I think, kind of stumbled across that on their own side of the pond and has much bigger success than we do. But a lot of music retail stores have no reason. They don't get the connection of performance and selling a product. So the only reason we came across that, I think, was from our years of touring.
Absolutely.
And then all those lessons we learned about, paying better attention to expenses and road living on the road and trying to make a living at it helped us be a little bit more organized in starting this business too. So,
like I said, there's so many people that have great ideas, and this is the same with music and starting their own business. If you think of I've had friends that have done this, that started a new restaurant. They had this great recipe. They did this whole deal. We're going to make $1 billion. This is going to be great. They learn how to do it, but it doesn't grow any. Or it just doesn't even take off. It's that idea. It's like, I've got this idea. It's going to happen. I'm going to throw this money at it, and things are just going to go. Think of most of our musician friends, most of the musicians that we've known through our entire lives. It's the same thing. I've learned how to do this. I'm going to throw everything at it, and this is going to turn out great. And this is where I still come back to this. I think the biggest difference is doing it for a living versus trying to make a business. Just whatever gets me a paycheck to get me to that next stage, I think is how all of us start out that deal. I watched it with the cookie business, that, anecdote of the guy who makes his cookies and got this great recipe and then puts them out there and it doesn't go anywhere. It's just.
Speaking of Duncan Hines.
Yeah, I'm speaking of Duncan Hines.
Mr. Duncan.
I was thinking it's the little elves.
But you know what I'm talking about, right? And we've seen it with our musicians too. I've run across so many musicians, and they're just like, "Man, I'm going to put it out, and I'm going to put out my EP, and it's going to be great."
Maybe that's the difference you were talking about.
Spotify, and it's all going to just blow up for me.
Working in your business versus working for your business. I mean, the problem with an artist is you're making the thing that you have to sell still.
Yep.
You know, so that you can't be everything all at once. So that's a great point.
Thank you.
I'm glad we got you to stop
one of those.
going off on it. But I have another
Before
question.
Jason goes and says something else. One thing John said about throwing money at it as a starting business, I think that's another good point, that if we hadn't struggled so much as a band where you have to do every single thing in the business, we probably would have done like a lot of business owners and went and got like a $300,000 business loan, bought all fancy furniture. And we personally know some people in town that have done this, and they spend a fortune on the most expensive furniture, and they want a lounge where people can sit down and look at and be comfortable, and then they buy the fixtures. And if you ever look to start a business, if you want to go buy slat wall and slat wall hooks and you buy them all from like the source, you're paying so much money. Every slat wall hook's an $8 hook, and we bootstrapped everything. Like, we built all our own fixtures. We went and found other stores that were closing and bought all their slat wall and their slat wall hooks.
We started out with my wife's uncle's business, who had gone out, and they just had a storage shed full of stuff, and the stuff had been sitting around for 5 or 6 years that nobody was using.
But the other side of that, like I was going to say, is letting the suppliers and the dealership or the manufacturers dictate what you order. I mean, we were very diligent about, we do not want 30 of that product. We just want 2.
Yeah.
So there is some smartness coming there. One thing I was going to ask, and is this, I know this has made a difference in my mentality of whether or not how much effort I put into this business versus when I was a musician, is outside forces like responsibility, families. How much of a difference would that make? I mean, I fantasize about not having children every day. But if we were still relying on music,
you kids.
Yeah, I love you. Obviously,
I even love his
all
kids.
60 of them.
I love his kids more than he does.
Probably. You don't see them every day. If we were still musicians and relying on that as our full-time income, would we be more successful because we're taking it more serious? Because I do know back in the day, I wasn't that serious. I wasn't that live or die motivated on that income.
I think
that was just more income to buy video games.
The problem you're saying is that you were just trying to make a living, not to try to make a business.
That's what I'm just saying. Is it the same with you guys? Did you feel a different kind of pressure and motivation?
My wife had a decent job.
That's what I was
living off of her.
Here's the problem. I think a lot of what you're saying as far as motivated inspiration is also about the people you surround yourself with. And in the industry, and I hate to, I don't want to get any flames and arrows here.
Yeah, you're going to get them.
There's a lot of it's okay, I've got a wife with a good job, she makes a living. So I think we would have fell into that trap of saying, well, she's got to take care of the expenses, and believe in my case,
I would have found a wife with a good job. Sorry.
But I think that would have been the case, is that we would have fell into that same mentality that 90% of the touring musicians have, that my wife's keeping down the fort and she's believing in my dream where I can just go out there and eke a living and not enough to pay for all the expenses. It has become kind of a badge of honor in at least the bluegrass industry to say, yeah, my wife supports my habit.
Secondary genre of music. I hear it all the time.
Independent.
Independent music in general. Yeah. I'm an artist, and I know that I'll never make, I mean, think about art. It's always, how do you how do you make $1 million in
as an artist and fill the blank? Start with 2. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So
you do
there's
such a good job delivering punchlines. The man walked across the street.
What's the deal with these bluegrass musicians?
I think it's my kid. He's interrupting.
Podcasting here. Golly, speaking of kids,
I hope that gets into something.
So I guess it's about time we put a fine-tooth bow, as I've said in the previous episodes, on this. And I want to look at it a different angle.
Why not?
We've been talking about external
podcasts. Let's start a new angle.
We've talked about external forces
Is this
on
the
the
golden
business.
era of guitar building?
Whether or not success is external or not, but I want to make it a little more focused on, is it harder to be a musician in a bluegrass band, or is it harder to be an owner of a music store? Day to day, which one did you find to be more difficult? Starting with John.
It depends on the level. I'm going to cut in because he looks so
goes into
confused.
that same
If we were doing what we were doing before, that was easier because I wasn't trying hard enough. I had so much free time.
To argue that point, though, time away from home, 200 days a week in a van with you idiots.
I would never go back and do it again.
But
If that's what you're
my
asking.
entire week was
Would you
open.
go back and do
sweating
that
your,
again?
your butt off on stage and struggling against a sound system that's not properly set up and begging an audience to respond.
Please like me. Please
Every
like
night.
me. And
What was harder?
You're right. That is a factor that we kind of forget, is that, besides the free time during the week that we could have been practicing and furthering ourselves but chose not to, there was also the stress of going to a festival, and it got pretty cutthroat in a lot of these festivals where every band was out to get each other, and they were not being very supportive the way I think they've gotten better at doing, maybe we're from the outside now.
Yeah, I think it's just
But
different.
at that time, it's a very cutthroat. Like, we got the 3 standing ovations. We're going to be the ones back next year, and we're outdoing, every band's trying to outdo each other, and the fans are now, we are like, we're the kings. If we don't like you, we're going to fold our lawn chairs on you and make a big scene about how much we dislike you. That was kind of a real
That's
kick to
stressful.
the psyche.
That added a lot to the stress of it. And then let alone, the fact that we were barely making a living and, could hardly afford candy bars and soda and video games. Those video games got
the
expensive.
diet was not so good on the road.
Yeah. So
They both have their-
honestly,
they both have
stress wise,
difficulties.
and I've had other jobs that were hard physical labor works. I would say this is my favorite job, and I think it honestly comes the easiest to me. Although, like I've stated before, including that other job, I've probably put more hours into this business than I've done anything in my life. I would say this is the easiest. I feel like we've
And I'm having fun with it too. I
reached
think
a point of
that's part of it
success.
too, is we're still enjoying it. I found that I didn't realize that I enjoy creating systems and coming up with procedures and processes. And every time something goes wrong, it's like, well, how can we fix this one so it doesn't happen again? And figuring those things out is actually pretty fun and addictive.
I think the advantage we have here is we lucked into, and I know I may get pushback from you guys, but we lucked into a business that was closer to the passion that we already had. And I think that's what makes this successful for us. We're able to get into a business that runs well. Because if we'd have dumped out of playing music and just took an office job selling paper or something that was just totally...
Have you ever watched The Office,
I am
John?
watching
That
The
could be
Office.
pretty
That's why
fun.
you can tell that's where I've been watching that with my kids. If we'd have dumped into that, it would not be the same thing. We want to take on this and make it as big as we can. And it also feeds the original passion, which was play music. We still get to get out there and make some music, not to the level that we used
More
to.
importantly, probably we get to introduce new people to playing
To
music.
music. That's it, exactly. We get to see the joy that we love about music. We get to get people tied into that. We get to work with the artists that we loved and that we still love and we listen to. We now get to bring them into this deal. We deal with all of the aspects that were great about the industry that we were in before. And we also get this idea of this business that is becoming something. And again, it's a long ways from where I think it can go
Talking
and where I
about you,
hope it to
Sweetwater.
go. Yeah, that's right. But we can see that, and we can see those goals, and yet we can come in here and go, man, this is fun. There's days where we all come in here and feel like I really need to probably be in bed today, but I know that there's something at the end of this rainbow that's going to be pretty cool. And
I would be a little remiss if I didn't say that doesn't come with a lot of extra stress. We were talking about some of the stress here, but now we also have 11 employees roughly that are relying on us not to mess this up. But before it was just kind of like, it's just
we fail, we fail.
Knuckleheads.
That's right.
And we'd always get a day job. We always used to say we could always get a day job. Now we've got other people that this is their day job.
As
and we
far
gotta
as
not
the-
mess that up.
As far as the day-to-day stress of this job, I really want to reevaluate that in about 5 or 6 years when I have my twins, or at least 7, 8 years old, and they're in school, and I can actually get a
Wait
full
till they
night's
become
sleep.
teenagers.
Because right now, honestly, I don't know if my lack of sleep and stress levels are from the business or the 5 kids that I currently
Yes.
own.
Yes, I'm here to
have
tell
been
you.
saddled with?
The answer is yes. I have a teenager. I'm here to tell you yes. That is exactly.
Well, you have 5
what
kids
it
now
is.
too. Like an idiot, you brought in 2 once you were almost done.
I know.
Toddlers and
it keeps coming back
I
to
don't
haunt
get
me.
it. Jeremy, you're the closest to being less stressed with your kids, I think.
But I get the bankers calling me about, hey, I want to see your current financial statements, and so that's a different.
It's different stress. Mine's just YouTube numbers are low, I guess, this week. And my editors are causing trouble.
They're striking until they get new Twinkies.
Yeah, until we get this AI thing under control.
I think a camera just got shut off somewhere.
Yeah.
Why does your voice sound so weird on this podcast?
No, I,
so high pitched.
honestly, I'll go back to my statement. I think this was the easier job, and I'm glad we've come to it. This is the most fun I've had. Even dealing with you guys day to day, I think this is a great job. I'm less stressed. I'm less. Difference between stress and despair. There were times as a musician I had a lot of despair and lack of hope. As a real worker on a real labor job, I worked 6 years mowing lawns and doing landscaping, and the amount of despair that you feel every day when you go back to the same place week after week and mow the same piece of grass week after week and think this grass is just this grass is just going to grow back again. Why am I cutting it? That I don't feel that anymore. I feel like I've got new things to do and futures to go to, and
gotcha.
I like this business.
Well, it sounds like it's time to renegotiate your
Also,
paycheck.
yeah, can I have a raise?
No, I'm going the other direction.
Hey, man, I got you guys
What do you gotta do,
20,000
go mow
subs.
lawns? Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, guys, I've enjoyed running this business. I will miss it.
Definitive yes or no. Is it easier or not?
I think it's easier because for me anyway, because I'm just enjoying so much what we're doing, what we're building, and it's a different feel than it is just going out there and
we're having success also. So
we're having
that's easier.
success, but I think music, we kind of backed into it too. We did this one too, but we started out as kids, and it's just kind of, hey, we're touring more and more and more and more. We didn't really put a lot of thought into doing it. We just continued doing what we started with. Yeah. And now this is like, we're in control of this thing. We're running this ship, and I think there's a little bit more excitement.
You can't say that word on the podcast. You say
ship.
Oh, ship. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. John?
I'll be the contrarian here. I will say my job was easier when we were playing as music.
I'll agree with that.
I just don't get, because what is he doing now?
I find that the job is a lot harder. I do actually find it to be more enjoyable. I do like the fact that it feels like every time I come into work, yes, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that I'm trying to figure out and juggle and try to make happen and make people happy. But the fact is that when they come together and I have something that I can show for it, it's more enjoyable in the end. I fully admit, and I said it before, when I was playing music full time, I did it just to get the next paycheck. It was not a business thought. And for me, that's what makes this different. Now I have something that I can be proud of. I can show, this is something that my kids now, all of a sudden they are old enough to start going, dude, Dad, this is like a business. And that is pretty cool. That is an awesome thing to be able to share with somebody, so.
I've already stated that I think it's easier.
One thing that I hate to go back to the other one, but let's not discount playing music either, because we talk about coolness factor, going to festivals and having top billing.
I love touring,
being on a billboard, going to a theater, and it's just like featuring the.
You know what's sick about me is I almost like the harder aspects of touring. Like my dream would be to have a date every night for 3 months, and my thrill was not even playing. When we were playing music on stage, it was fun and I like playing music, but that would be no different than me playing at home. My thrill was being able to set up a really good sound system on a good stage and have our high quality do multimedia thing. I'm more into the production of a concert than I am the actual concert. If I go see people,
it was pretty
concerts,
obvious with your playing.
If I go to concerts, I look at that setup. That's so much fun. That's so cool.
So you should have been just like a roadie.
I probably could have been a good sound man. I probably would have been just as happy running sound for a good, if I had good equipment.
He would have been running around in his basketball shorts or his
one of those little radios
pants,
where they put the little
fanny pack
radio on your shoulder. I want one of those
radio
so
on
bad.
the shoulder.
All right, guys. I appreciate you being a part of my podcast.
No,
again.
I want
Thanks
one
for
more
joining
question.
me.
One more question.
Good question, Jason.
Who misses Bill? So that's one factor.
Guys,
and how do we get Bill into the business?
We see him 4 days a week.
I see him. I don't, because I'm over in this office.
What are we
He's
gonna
over
do
next door.
if we got him involved in this business? Who's going to watch the kids?
Bill.
I like when he's next door and none of us are visiting him. He just walks over here and sits down in my office and goes, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah, he'll make his rounds through the office once a week, and he's walks through my office while saying, "How's it going, the kids?" And as he's making his way out the door. I think we need to make Bill part of this.
I would love
we need a
Let's
segment on
podcast.
YouTube.
We should have him as a guest.
He
That'd be good.
should be here.
He's going to be a future guest.
Papa
of the
Bill.
podcast.
For those of you who don't know the Chapman's history, Bill, our dad, is currently teaching at the shop, but he was the banjo player in the Chapman's for the entirety of it.
And history buff that would educate us on every site we ever performed
and the star of What's Bill Wearing. That was something that was popular. We should start that
we
back
did
up.
fun stuff back then.
Anyway, well, we have an answer to our question. It's a 2 yeses and a no.
Jason, that was a good question.
2 yeses and a maybe.
I didn't like it.
Yeah, well, stay tuned as we,
Felt like we argued for us.
the Acoustic Shoppe knows things. Next week it'll be a person, people. It'll be a people.
Okay.
All right, stay tuned for the next Acoustic Shoppe knows people.
Hey, before we get out of here, guys,
You got one more question?
I got to say something. If you haven't been paying attention to the logo and the artwork on the podcast, look at our mouths. I didn't know this until
You
it was
didn't know
pointed
that?
out.
Oh,
At first, I
Mark
didn't.
told me that.
So every one of our mouths is the instrument we play. Like I have a mandolin mouth, and Jason has a bass mouth, and John has a guitar
I
mouth.
had no idea.
See,
didn't
look at
know
it,
that?
guys. Look at the artwork. That was a
You
great
guys-
job there. Mark Montgomery
I
did
don't
that.
pay attention to
Each of our
things.
mouths is our instrument.
Isn't that neat?
Isn't that neat?
Isn't that neat?
Hidden Easter egg there. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take me away.
The Acoustic Shoppe Knows People. Handmade by Trent Pruitt, Hinkley Hinkleston, and Jason Chapman for the Acoustic Shoppe.
Theme song written and performed by Ofer Koren.
And please remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.